with this to explore what is to be free and to be playful and more and more and more. Thank you, Elise.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. All right, so last summer, it was the pandemic. I was in Austria. It was a hot day. I went to the kitchen to get a piece of chocolate, and it starts melting on my fingers. And I used to draw a lot, and in the pandemic, I started again, right? And I'm looking at it, and I think to myself, what would happen if I drew with this piece of chocolate? I take it to the page, and I use it like a piece of charcoal. It's melting and melting more. I start using my fingers, and then I get curious. I'm like, what other food can I use to make a monkey? And I get some coffee, and I throw it on there. And then I go and I get some beets, because I'm like, hey, that might work. I get this right here is pumpkin seed oil. It's an Austrian delicacy. And I keep going. And in the end, I take out my charcoal, my pens, and I finish off this monkey. And I kind of love him. He's really cute, and he's still on my wall, and I can't believe he's held up so well, being made of food. But basically, while I have been drawing this, I felt very free, right? Like, this is a very playful drawing. It was a playful state. I was curious about my materials. I'd never drawn with chocolate. And I was super surprised by the drawing that ended up emerging, okay? And the whole thing, it probably took me like 15 minutes. It wasn't a lot of time, but this monkey, it was not the result of 15 minutes of work. The playful attitude that I had while drawing it was actually something that I've worked on for a really long time. It's not who I naturally am. It wasn't like that this day somehow the muse came down and I got lucky. This was something that I worked on for 10 years. And today I'm going to talk about that work. I'm going to talk about how I had to reconceive my notions of talent and creativity. And I'm going to talk about how now, like how I've been able to get to a point where most times that I get to a blank page, I can find myself in that playful and generative and really surprising state. And it's fun. And as we've talked about the theme, it's free. I feel free. And this work, it started by accident. 10 years ago, I was living in San Francisco. One night I was bored. There was a drawing studio around the corner from my house. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go try and draw a naked person. It's going to be better than bad television. Just for the night. And when I walked in, the teacher, his name is Michael Markowitz, he comes up to me and he gives me an order. Forget everything you have ever learned about drawing. He was a bit abrasive, and I was taken aback, and I was like, okay. And but I sit down to one night, right? And I sit down, the model comes out, she takes off her clothes, I start to draw. Michael comes over, he taps me on the shoulder, and he says, do not look at the page. And I'm like, wait, what? and I look around because I was just dropping in, but all these other people had been in class for a few days, and they're like this. The model's there, and they're like this. And I'm like, what? And I'm confused, but I try to do what they're doing, right? And it feels really awkward at first. Because I wanted to look at what I was drawing. And why did I want that? I wanted to look because I wanted to make something good. I wanted to make something that looked like a body. And this is something I don't really want to admit, but I wanted to make something better than the person next to me. And if I didn't look, all of that went out the window. And at the end of the night, I ended up with like 50 drawings filled with scribbles. They went in the trash. But after 3 hours of doing this, I realized that what I was doing was extremely freeing. And I also realized that Michael, this man who could be difficult, he had a lot to teach me. And so that night I signed up for the full 22-week course. This was supposed to be a one-night thing, and I ended up staying in this drawing studio for 3 years. I would just repeat the course over and over. And for the first 11 weeks, the instruction was always the same. Do not look at the page. So this was not a warm-up exercise. This was like, we committed for over months. And this class, that night, it changed my life. Because before I ended up in Michael's class, I had thought of creativity as fixed and as tied to talent. You cannot teach creativity, that's what I thought. And these ideas, they've been solidified for me when I had been at a writing workshop. About 10 years before, when I was in college, I signed up. I wanted to be a writer, and I was like sexy and cool. And I go to class, and there's no instruction in a writing workshop. You just come, you present your work, and you're evaluated by your teachers and your peers. And when I was confronted with honest opinions of my own work, which was like mediocre, I didn't think that it was something I could work on to get better at. Instead, I took it as a message that I did not have talent, and I should get out of the game. And so I quit. That was it. Like one workshop, and I'm like, no. And the teacher, he seemed to confirm this, right? Like, he wasn't interested in me. He was interested in the kids that had talent. Okay. And some of them have gone on to like work at the New Yorker, so. But here, when I got to the drawing studio, here was Michael. And Michael deeply believed that everybody was inherently creative. Like, he would say, look at children. And most importantly, he believed that there was a path for everyone to access those parts of themselves. And here's a quote by Abraham Maslow, the psychologist. And interestingly, he also had ideas like me, that talent was fixed and not something that could be changed and only for the special, until he actually studied it in real people. And when he did, he found that he found creativity to be a fundamental characteristic, inherent in human nature, a potentiality given to all or most human beings at birth, which most often is lost or buried or inhibited as the person gets enculturated. Michael thought along these same lines. Enculturated, this is an important word here, because he thought that over the years our conditioning had gotten us further and further away from those playful and bold and spontaneous parts of ourselves. And so his teaching was really a reprogramming. We could also use the word deprogramming. It was trying to rid us of these layers of bad habits that come with growing up, this rigidity that comes with becoming an adult. And the key to how he was going to do this was that he focused on our state. He had a quote that he really liked to read, and I heard it so many times, and here it is. And it's by Robert Henri, an American realist painter. The object of painting a picture is not to make a picture, however unreasonable this may sound. The picture, if a picture results, is a byproduct and may be useful, valuable, in turning as a sign of what has passed. The object, which is back of every true work of art, is the attainment of a state of being, a state of high functioning, a more than ordinary moment of existence. I'm also going to say a state of playfulness, a state of freedom. In such moments, activity is inevitable. And whether this activity is with brush, pen, chisel, or tongue, its result is but a byproduct of the state, a trace, the footprint of the state. And let me get to my next note. So Michael's lessons, they concentrated not on our technical skills, but on our state. And I think there's two main ingredients that go into creative work, right? On one hand, you have the technical skill, the craft, maybe that study of perspective, something like this. And then there's what I call the invisible craft. That's the voice, the engine that is behind a work. It's sort of what separates the great art, I think, from mediocre or even just boring. Technique, this side, this is teachable. This is a hand study by some artist. With enough study, every single person in this room could arrive at that. Okay? But these two drawings, these are my drawings. They're of monkeys. I couldn't teach you guys how to draw these drawings. In fact, I drew them, and I could not replicate them. Like, it's impossible. Because I think the voice is strong. But what I can teach, or I don't know if I can, but what Michael could teach, and what you can work on, is this state. And working to get better at this state. Like these are, as Henri said, they're footprints of the state, right? And so this is teachable, and you can get there with deliberate practice. And we've already learned Michael's first constraint that was going to help us, which was not to look at the page. And so what other lessons did we focus on in this class? And the first lesson was how to see, or how we needed to like relearn how to see. Michael differentiated between two modes of seeing. One was habitual and functional, right? You're seeing the bus, oh, I'm looking for the fork in the kitchen, oh, I found it. And the other was the mode of seeing that you might have when you're in some brand new place. When you arrive, you're confronted with something you don't know. Awe, wonder, curiosity, seeing things as they are instead of using mental shortcuts of understanding. And I have a really good example of this tension between the two modes of seeing that comes from this week, actually. This drawing, it's a face. I drew this on Monday night here in this room. The teacher, there was a drawing teacher here at Lisbon Drawing Club, amazing. He had instructed us to look at the shadow and the light, the highlights and the lowlights. And this is not how I usually draw, it's not what I'm usually thinking, but I listened to his cue. And I was at the back of the room, I was behind the bar, the model was here, and I kept looking at her face, and I realized that I was expecting the highlights, the light, to be hitting her in certain ways that it was not. And I wanted it to be hitting her in different ways than it was, because I wanted the lips to be more delineated. I wanted the nose to look like how I think a nose looked. And the prime example of where I really was getting caught up, and I honestly did this multiple times, thinking that each time maybe I'd look up and maybe it would somehow appear. I could not see the whites of her eyes. It was just like a shadow. It was as I've drawn it, that was all I could see. Whites of the eyes, that's what makes humans human. And I wanted to be able to put that into my drawing. But I didn't feel comfortable doing this really, but I was like, I'm just gonna draw what I see. I'm not gonna impose the whites of the eyes that I'm not seeing, that I know are there, but that I'm not seeing. And so I drew my actual experience and not a projected, interpreted, or abstracted one. And it was super interesting because I had that, I was so aware of that tension between my expectation and reality. And it also, as an aside, it just made it so, I was more engaged. I was completely curious. I was wait, what? How's that not what I'm thinking? This isn't my favorite drawing or anything like that, but think of it if I had just added the whites of the eyes. It would diminish, I think, the drawing. And so this move from the habitual to the actual was also present in Michael's second major lesson, which was the honest mark. So Michael, he wanted to move us away from creating work that was in search of or responsive to certain criticism. And because of this, Michael never told anybody in class, this is a good drawing. Conversely, he never told anybody in class, this is a bad drawing. You guys, I was there for 3 years. He never did it, and it's actually amazing. But he did give an evaluation, and his only evaluation was to say, this is an honest mark. And so just a technical thing, a mark is just any line or whatever that your drawing tool makes on a paper. And this is a picture of a mark that I made that Michael anointed as honest. And so, what was an honest mark? There were no consistent distinguishing characteristics, right? It could be long, short, complex, simple, whatever, complicated. But what they had in common was an ineffable quality. Honest marks, they stood apart. We'd put all our drawings on clotheslines and we'd look through them, and he would cycle through them, and they would. To the whole room, they would stand apart, and they were beyond taste, right? You might not think it's cool, but you could feel its power. And Michael's explanation for what unified them was that they had all emerged from a certain experience of the artist, right? And here, again, we're back to the state. And when drawers were asked to describe how they felt when they made an honest mark, and Michael would ask this question, he meant viscerally. How do you feel viscerally? Not emotionally. He wasn't a woo-woo guy. This was not therapy. The most common response was free and connected. Free and loose in their body, connected to their actual experience. An honest mark came out of an authentic experience, while the other marks came out of a habitual response. And so then, of course, the big question became, well, how do I make an honest mark? And Michael would give us actually some guidelines of what to do and which were also along the lines of basically like, don't do what you think you should do, right? Don't try to dance like a great drawer. If you saw Michael draw, he'd kind of draw like this. He'd like, just don't try and copy me. Don't make sexy marks. Sexy mark was a term he had for a mark that you had made once and it was really great, honest, whatever, and then you just kept trying to do it again. And you'd see people do this. Don't just copy the outlines. As I wanted to do the other day, I wanted to just outline a nose as I imagined a nose to be. And so instead, he wanted us to focus on our true experience, to respond in the moment. And so to make honest marks, I pay attention to my state, to the shifts in my experience. And it's a practice, right? It isn't luck, but it's also not an equation. It's not like do X plus Y, get an honest mark. It's like meditation. Show up, sit with intention, and over time your capacity grows. My knowledge about what state in me produces an honest mark and how to shift into that state grows. And slowly over time, the frequency with which I produce honest marks increases. And this was a game changer, right? Because it reoriented me. Before, it was the goal of making good work or avoiding bad work. If that was taken away, what was I going to work towards? And here was the answer, and the honest mark. And it was a profound shift. I got more free. And so confronted with the blank page, my aim simply became to produce honest and connected marks, moment to moment, true to my own sensibilities and drives. And here is where I began to discover like the irony in all of this. That when I concentrated more on my process, and the more I shifted my goal away from making good work, the better my work became. Okay, sorry. All right, so after we practiced seeing an honest march for the first 11 weeks without looking at the page, a change comes. In week 12, Michael would say, look at the page. And you guys, I was in this class many times, and every single time, everybody, including me, would be like, excuse me, what? Like, and we got mad. Like, we were used to the freedom of drawings that we threw away. But not looking at the page had been an external structure for something we needed to internalize. We needed to stop being focused only on product, but this did not mean that product did not matter. So in the same way that we had practiced seeing the model, we were now supposed to see our own drawings. And the big lesson of the second half of the class was interact with your image. And to interact with our image, we had to look at our work, evaluate it, viscerally feel what it needed and didn't need, and then change it, play with it. And like, this sounds so easy, but it's hard. And this wasn't something that you did just once. It was like continually, moment by moment. Each mark determined the next mark. It wasn't about intellectual evaluation, it was instinctual impulses. And the drawing itself was the source of the information, right? Like the drawing emerged. There was no end goal. The drawing emerged from this interaction, so it's always a surprise. It's always a footprint of that state. And this lesson, interact with your image, it's an interesting one because, as I said, like I practiced this for 3 years when I was in this class, and I intellectually understood it, but I couldn't do it. Like I couldn't really get it. Like I didn't get it in my bones until I started drawing monkeys in the pandemic, and that was almost like 8 years later. And here, this is a stop motion video of one of the first monkeys I drew. Like drawing monkeys in the pandemic, drawing monkeys was my pandemic project, let's say. And this is the one that kicked it off, right? And it was a stop motion video that I took while I was doing it, and I realized that each time I would stop and I would take the picture, it was like Michael's lesson, right? Because it was like each time I had to look at the drawing, think, what does it need, what doesn't it need, make my quick evaluation, and continue. And so in a way, I'm using this video to sort of demonstrate like how the marks emerge in this process. And it just keeps going until you get to the final product. And I had a very favorite exercise that Michael used to help us learn this. And it was basically like drawing musical chairs. And what we would do is we'd be at the easel and we'd get 30 seconds. And after 30 seconds, Michael would stop us and he would rotate us. And so by the end, there were 15 drawings that everybody had worked on a few times. And each time we would come to the drawing, Michael would ask us, okay, sometimes he'd have us close our eyes, and then we'd open them. He'd say, what do you like? What don't you like? Now change it. And this is the most fun exercise. Because none of the drawings were my own. So I didn't feel attached. I had no ego. And if I didn't like something, I had no problem striking it out. Like I wasn't scared to do that. And I also had no problem doing something completely crazy and bold because after 30 seconds, I was gone. And like somebody else was gonna have to deal with the problem. And Michael's point with this lovely exercise, which I suggest to everyone, is that we should cultivate this same freedom of response every time we look at our own drawing. Again, easier said than done. And so I would try, but I could never do it. But now, somehow, years later, with the monkeys, I feel myself finally getting it. Like, I get it. And these are stills from the video that started this presentation. And in a way, I'm guessing, I don't know, but I'm going to guess there's about 30 seconds in between each of them. And so you can see how, like, the choices that I made in time and sort of the different responses. And it's hard for me to explain really, but like, because it's not, again, it's not an intellectual thing, but it's like, the yellow comes because I just felt like I wanted something heavier on this side, and then this last yellow comes because I just wanted, it's hard to explain. But this really is those 30-second intervals and responding to the drawing in the moment. And and Michael, he wanted us to keep this flexibility, this interaction, dedication, commitment, this toying with an image, even if things have gone sideways. Don't give up on an image, he would say, and I would try to follow his instruction, but I'd always give up, always. Like even if I was like pretending to not give up. Again, decade made me grow a bit, and so I made this drawing really recently, and this drawing like completely, like in the very beginning it had gone completely sideways, like it scares me, like and so I took it as my own little personal challenge to save it, because this is actually what I've been working on the most now, because it's still very challenging to me. It's very challenging to not want to like throw that in the trash, trust me. And I have a little video. Let's start it. Okay. And so what don't I like? Well, the whole face. And unfortunately, I don't have the video all the way to here. But this is what ends up emerging. And you can even see I make choices then that I then take away sort of or modify later with the blue in the background. But basically, Michael wanted us to believe that if we stayed with something, if we were bold, if we were willing to really interact with our image, that the possibilities for our work were more than we could even imagine. And here I have to say, like, he's right, And you can see, I like the face, it stays, but. And anyways, so all of these lessons, my 3 years with Michael, they shifted me completely, like a complete new orientation, right? The before state, the writing workshop as an example, is that my focus was on the product, end goal. And that the evaluation that I cared about was external. What are other people going to say about my work? And talent was this like binary thing. Either you had it or you didn't, but you needed it to be good, so. And failure meant that I didn't have talent. It was a condemnation. And then I was able to shift through Michael's class. My focus became on my process, not on my end goal. And the evaluation part, I think it's a really important one. In the beginning, I had no evaluation because we threw it away. But what then we had to focus on was strengthening our internal evaluation. What do I like? What don't I like? What am I feeling attached to? And what needs to be changed? And in this model, talent is workable. Everyone is inherently creative. The question becomes, how do we get there? How do we work towards that? And failure here is inevitable. It will happen. It's part of the process. But it gives you access to your talents. And I thought that last thing was so important, such an important shift for me that it gets its own slide. You guys, I learned to draw by making crap drawings. I have thousands of drawings in the garbage. I don't really have a lot of pictures from Michael's works because they're mainly in the garbage. And before drawing class, I avoided failure at all costs. Like, for real. But now I saw failure as a pathway to better work. The way to progress as an artist meant failing and then failing again. And so I started chasing failure in other domains. Like I realized, oh wait, failure's like a good thing to be good at. You guys, I went to CrossFit and I was not an athlete and I was at the very bottom of the leaderboard. There's an actual leaderboard, so it's not like me being modest, okay? I was at the bottom, and I got on stage and I told a story at a storytelling event and like I was mediocre, like I was not good. Everyone else was like, but I hung in there. Like no longer was failure a thing where I was like gonna peace out, and so I hung in there. After 2 years of consistency, I was at the top of the leaderboard in CrossFit, like maybe twice in my whole life, but I was there. Wow. And I kept getting on stage. I run Storytelling Lisboa now. I've told some stories that I'm super proud of, which is kind of like shocking considering where I started. But most importantly, I returned to writing. Like that was the thing that I wanted to do in my little 18-year-old college self. And I had been too scared to do it because I wasn't an automatic talent. And when I returned to writing, Michael's lessons were in me. The honest mark. Seeing things as they actually were instead of the abstracted version. Interacting with my material. Failure became expansive. And as I practiced failing, my tolerance and capacity for it grew, and this led to increased freedom, free. I got more free. So I drew at Michael's for 3 years, and then I pursued these other interests. I stopped drawing, really. And when the pandemic hit, I started drawing monkeys, and suddenly I just found myself to be a way better drawer. It was kind of a strange thing. And I think that it had been the fact that I had been practicing failure so much in other domains. Like I had courage now when I approached my work. I'd finally internalized so many of those lessons that I'd only intellectually grasped. I was better at getting into that state. I was playing, or I am playing. And monkeys were my perfect muse, mine. They have these really expressive faces. Like these faces are completely unexpected. So rich with feeling. And when you look at these, like I cannot see these in a visual way because I don't know what a monkey face looks like. Like I can only see it as it really is. So they sort of work for that. And also, this is the first time in my life that I wasn't drawing in a room full of people. And I actually think that drawing alone at home, it kind of reduces this pressure. There's no witnesses. And so now I just am, like playing, really. Like experimenting with new materials. I'm always trying to push out of my comfort zone, my habits. I'm using, Instagram is really good for that because you can get really inspired by all these different artists and like copy their style, copy their approach, see what, push myself. And I'm so, I don't know, it's just been fun, curious, surprised. I'm surprised by every drawing that emerges. Like, I did not expect any of these. These are all this guy. This is my favorite. Like, look at him, he's amazing. Like, he doesn't look real, but he's real. And so I'm gonna end this talk on this slide. It's sort of like a summary of growth as a drawer. And you can see these are like some of the only images I have of drawings that I drew at Michael's, and those are ones that I liked. And so at the top, I wrote how many works of my own I liked in the process. So when I was drawing at Michael's, I probably liked 1 in 100. I don't think that's an exaggeration. In the interim, I didn't draw very much since Michael, but sometimes I would, and then because I wasn't in that same class, I kind of broke out of my habits a bit. And I found myself liking more, like around 1 in 10. And then with the monkeys, suddenly I find myself in this playful state like almost all the time. And I don't know, like I like most drawings that I make. I'm also not giving up. Like I'm working until I like it. Whereas like in Michael's, I'm just pew, bye. And so to close, to end this talk, I want to underline one thing. Because I have been in too many spaces and classrooms where I feel the message is quite different. And that is that every single person is creative. Failure can give you access to your talents. And there's a way to work at finding your own strong creative voice. And I encourage everyone in here to go out and play. Thank you.
And achievements. Wow, incredible. So now we have 10 minutes for questions. You can ask everything. Wow.
I completely forgot about that.
5 minutes. No, 10 minutes, whatever. So who has some questions?
I'm out of hey. So you said it to like 7 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
What you don't like about the 3? You know, like what makes like you go like yeah, this is not like.
Gosh, I almost wish I put a slide of the ones I don't like that much.
Yeah.
Because again, it's an ineffable thing, right? Like it's like I'm like ugh. It's just like it doesn't feel right.
But do you think that something that you don't like your states? Or the draw that you've done, it's not related to the state that you are at?
It's actually, that's a really, really good question, and in a way I haven't really thought through it. The thing is that the state is sort of evolving as you work, right? And I think that this is on this slide, don't give up on an image is an important one. Because I think what happens is, sometimes you put a mark and you expect it to enhance the drawing. And then you see it and you're like, ooh, that was a mistake. You think, oh shoot, that was a mistake. And you're like, you get a bit scared. You're like, how do I fix it? And sometimes you have this capability to just, I don't know, be loose free about it. And just make a bold thing. And then you fix it. And then, so then you're back to the state. But sometimes what happens is you make that mark and you're like, oh shit, like, that's not good. And then you make another mark and you try and fix it, and you're like, oh, that's not good. And so the making of the marks themselves and the continual sort of like failure, it kind of, you get demoralized. Yeah. And so in a way, it's like that being demoralized pulls you out of the state.
Yeah.
And then you get very self-conscious, right? You're like, oh, this is bad. Then that starts to ring in your head. So in a way, I think that's part of it, right? The state's not like you get in it and then it's almost like you're always fooling with the state. You're always like, it's like the state emerges out of the interaction too. And so it's really hard to yeah, when you start to fail, to continue. Yeah.
How do you continue then? How do you come back after the failure?
That's the challenge. I think that the coming back after the failure is the challenge, and that's the practice. Like the way that you come back after the failure is you sort of trick yourself. You're like, okay, well, it's you accept failure, you accept the possibility so that you can continue. And the more that I think you accept the failure, and the more that you continue, the more that you might have sort of reparative experiences. Where like this for me is an important one because like I've repaired the disaster, so I know it can happen. Like so I have that reparative experience. So then the next time that I like see a disaster, I'm like, okay, well, Liz, that one time you did it. Like and see what can happen. Like hang in there. But that's the thing. It's a practice because sometimes it's just really hard to do. And I'm not, like, I know there's an artist I met on Instagram, and he does not throw away a drawing. He finishes every one, paintings more, and he just learned to do that.
But is it something important that if you try to repair straight away? Because sometimes we just don't understand the thing that we are, let's say you're drawing something and you don't like it. But sometimes trying to fix straight away, it could be worse. Like sometimes you just give like an hour, go for a stroll and try to understand what's...
Yeah, totally. And so the way that I draw now, personally, is I don't really, I do it all in the moment, and I do it all really quickly. Yeah. And that's my personal style or whatever. But I think that there's value, especially with writing, I have a different approach. I think there's value sometimes in taking a drawing that has gone sideways. Actually, to be honest, this drawing, it went sideways, and because I'm not going to get back in the state when I make that. Yeah. And the next day I came back to it. So I kind of fortified myself and came back to it. And writing's the same. It's like, and also your impression of your work changes if you put it aside. And so I think there's a lot of artists that put their stuff aside for years and then finally return to it. With a fresh eye, with a fresh ability to toy and play. But yeah, I think you.
Thank you first for all of that, because it was really interesting and it made me think about a bigger picture. Because I believe where we're most afraid of failure is the personal interactions. So we are really fixed on that. So what I was really curious about, if it's changed you in the bigger than creativity field, if it's changed you personally, with your interactions with humans, with your human relations, like with everything that we are really, really afraid of failing.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think that this like today I talked about drawing, but what I was really talking about was a process. And I think the process applies to all mediums, and I think the process applies to, as you're saying, interpersonal relations. Shame, evaluation, good product, bad product, that's about how other people see you. But yeah, I mean, when I said practicing failure, like I started practicing it in a lot of things. And like dating, for example, was something that I was just not good at. And I don't know, I practiced getting almost rejected and expressing my feelings when I didn't think they'd be returned. And that's the thing, like if you're out there dating and you're too scared to reveal your feelings because you might fail, you might be rejected, like that stops you. It creates this almost like fence around you. And so yeah, definitely practiced it with practicing vulnerability. I think it's all I just think everything is related. That if you practice the process in one area, it will show up in another. Yes,
thank you so much. That was very, very entertaining, and I loved your presentation. As you were speaking, I also thought about flow state, and it sounds kind of related to what you're saying, but I would just love your perspective on flow state and then the state that you were talking about.
Yeah, so flow state, I think there's, I can't pronounce his name, the guy that wrote about that primarily.
I don't remember, but yeah.
I never read it, but I heard about flow state and all this stuff. And I guess, in some ways, the reason I wanted to give this talk is people talk about flow, being in the zone, and you're like, okay, awesome, but like, how do I get there? And so I guess I always, the flow state was sort of always this ambiguous thing. And it's like, can we engineer a way to get to the flow state? And so I think that this is about this. For me, I feel in flow when I'm drawing now, and I didn't always, and I work to get there. So yeah, I think it's the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
More questions?
Do you ever feel like drawing a monkey on the car? I don't know, like sometimes you're like in the shower and you have this crazy like feeling that you go like that would be a good drawing, but you're like.
Dude, there was like a point when the pandemic that I was like drawing monkeys like all the time, and I would like be outside and I'd be like, I remember like looking at a tree once and I was like looking at the way the bark was and I was like, oh my god, it's a monkey. But yeah, on a car I haven't yet, but yeah, but maybe. I mean maybe, right? I think finding that sort of freedom of like, oh, let me try this, and the monkeys for me are interesting because it's like I have a unified, most artists have kind of like a unified style or approach, and then they kind of like do different things. For me, but I have a unified subject and I'm trying to approach it in different ways. Because it's interesting. I'm bored if I do the same thing again. That's boring to me. Some people love it, like, but not me.
Okay, I have a question.
Yes.
Please tell us, what is Curious Monkey? What's the concept behind?
Oh, Curious Monkey.
Yes.
That was the place you guys are all sitting in right now.
Yes.
So we started this because let's all relate it back together. Like, I wanted a playful place to explore creativity. Because again, I do think that there can be these notions of creativity as sort of elite, special, or like over-intellectualized or something like that. So here it's community-based, in-person, creative stuff. We have lots of different things going on here. We have there's a photo club. A Lisbon Drawing Club was here last Monday. They come back every month. We have concerts, we have film club, debate. And so it's a relaxed and playful space to meet people and explore creativity.
Okay. So you have workshops every week, right?
Yeah, we've been sort of quiet this month, but yeah, like next week we have I think it's a pop-up paper arts workshop. The week after that we have a mythological inspired painting workshop,
That's cool.
and yeah, lots of different things.
And it's not a co-working space.
Not a co-working space. Not a co-working space. We're usually not open in the day.
Yeah. Okay. Just curious because for some people it's a brand new venue.
Yeah, totally.
So it's very interesting, and I love it a lot. I took part in several workshops here. With Marco, design, illustrations, or something. Yeah. So I really liked it, and I really recommend. Okay, that's it for today. Thank you so much for coming.